I met this old man sitting here in this bar. He told me stories and tales from afar. I said, for world traveler, what are you doing sitting here? He said, the beer's as good in here as it is anywhere. Said, have you drank all your life? He said, not yet, I'm in son, but we're drinking tonight. And he said, I drink lots of beer, man, I drink lots of beer. From here to Tanzania, man, I drank a lot of beer. Hold your glasses high there, we'll drink a lot of beer. I said, like, what kinds of beers you drink, old man? He said, I don't know, let me see, let me think. I can make a low roll rock, honey brown, shot about blue, cast red rock, low brown, blue, black, nigga, but no, such a fine fella, long, sky beer, and a whole lot of soul. Don't seconds gas, but Keystone and Bass, said, I drink a lot of beer. I said, by golly, old man, that load of beer ain't a world traveler, but I drank beer from around the world. He said, like, what kinds of beers you drink? I said, I don't know, let me see, let me think. Like Pabst Blue, an old Semi-Auto, Bud Light, Cola, Carl, Stricken, Heineken, Lord, all run like a girl on the front of, oh, we're here, be drinking that stuff. I ain't finished, we'll drink a lot of beer. Yeah. I drink a lot of beer, man, I drink a lot of beer. From here to Tanzania, man, I drank a lot of beer. Hold your glasses high in air, we'll drink a lot of beer. Old man says, son, I got you beat, son, about twice your age. I said, Bo, you're about 3 times my age, you old fart. And he says, in that case, drink 2 times as much beer as you. I said, really? Like, what kinds of beers you drink? He said, I don't know, let me see anything. Like Pelican, Steinway, Black Label, Budweiser, Miller, Mickey's, Molson, Mississippi, Pearl, and the Beast, Fat Tire, Pizza, Wicked Ale, what the Roach and finished, I ain't finished, we'll drink a lot of beer. Yeah, I drink a lot of beer, man, I drink a lot of beer. From here to Tanzania, man, I drank a lot of beer. Hold your glasses high in air, we'll drink a lot of beer.
Okay, let's just get on with it. Forge gang, let's go! It is your host with the most, the Warhammer here, and we are doing a geopolitical analysis of the state of Texas. This is going to constitute my first, the first episode of the first main body corpus, the first main corpus of my geopolitical series, where I will examine many different countries and ultimately get down to the real chagrins of all of these different countries and states. For the first one, I am doing my home state of Texas. Alright, so I'm going to try to get Ghost of Niccolo into a call here, and see if he wants to talk about it. Let's just see if Ghost of Niccolo actually wants to join the call. Oh, there we go. Alright. It looks like a guy gel wants to do an interview or something of me. I don't know. Alright. I'll see if I can get Ghost of Niccolo in a call and see if he wants to contribute anything to... Hey, Ghost of Niccolo, what's up, man?
Hey, Aaron, bro.
Hey, do you want to talk about the geopolitics of Texas? Would you be interested?
Yeah, like, right now, or like when, bro?
In about 20 minutes. Maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I want to talk about the economic history and development of the state, and you might not want to be interested in doing that, or do you?
I mean, I'm kind of interested. I just don't really have the time to do it right now. Like, I'm about to do some shit around my house and whatever. But if you're still going, bro, then I'll definitely hop on or whatever.
Okay, in like an hour You want to do it in an hour or what?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, an hour's probably all right. That'll give me a time to get stuff finished up or whatever.
Okay, just holler at me.
I don't know a whole lot about it now, Hammer. I'm not like an expert in it, you know. I don't know how much I can really contribute, you know. I know some stuff, but...
Well, I don't intend to stay on. I mean, I don't intend to stay up all night just talking about Texas. This is going to be a pretty fast. This is going to be pretty fast analysis.
Okay. Well, yeah, dude. I'll definitely try to get on. We'll do some analysis. You're not streaming right now, are you?
Yes, I'm streaming.
Or are you? You are streaming.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll see you in a moment, bro.
Alright, yeah, bro, definitely. Just give me a few, I'll call you.
Okay.
Or something. Alright, buddy. Talk to you soon.
See you, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to be irritating to you 3-4. Stoic fears the forge. Dude, I thought Stoic and me were on good terms now. I'm gonna call the guy, Jill. Hey, what's up, bro?
Hey, mate.
Hey, what did you want to talk about?
Oh, I was just wondering about your weight loss. Are you still doing your, like, pill diet?
Yeah, I'm still doing that, yes. I'm 211.
Well, I was just thinking, like, you should be careful about the amount of ibuprofen you eat, because it can, like, really fuck up your stomach and give you, like, stomach ulcers.
Well, I'm doing the ibuprofen for inflammation in my ankle. So it's only in regards to the inflammation in my ankle, which is gone now. But dude, I couldn't even walk on my foot. I wasn't even able to walk on my foot for a couple of days. Yeah. Did you?
Okay. So you're not taking the ibuprofen anymore?
No, I'm not. Oh yes, yeah. I'm still taking it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still taking it, bro.
Well, I mean, just be careful about that, because you might really mess up your stomach. So just be careful about the amount of ibuprofen you eat.
Well, it does help me to lose weight a lot.
I mean, you'll lose all your weight if you don't have a stomach. So.
Did you want to talk about the state of Texas, bro? Like, did you want to co-host?
Yeah, I can talk about Texas.
Okay. Well, Texas was a very sparsely inhabited outpost of the Spanish Empire. Like, nobody lived in this region until the 19th century, basically. And Mexico, well, Spain tried to invite some settlers in, like, at the very beginning of the 1800s. And then the Mexican War of Independence broke out, and Mexico became independent. And they set up a series of impresarios to sell super cheap land. And back then, the land was extremely cheap because it was a very poor Cujolayo y Tejas was an extremely poor backwater place. And so Anglo-Americans and like Scottish or Celtic and Anglo-Americans came into the state. It was mainly people that came from Texas and North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, and Virginia that came in here to this place, and they eventually declared independence. So there was the Texas War of Independence. There was about 37,000 people, including slaves. One of the reasons the Mexicans did not want to continue the immigration was because it was Protestant. It was largely Protestant. The Mexicans were Roman Catholic. And
Yeah, a lot of them from Germany and stuff, right?
no, at this point there wasn't very many Germans. It was mostly people from Britain, in Ireland at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, the Germans only came later. And then during the Texas War of Independence, it was mostly people from the South and from the Midwest that came over to Texas. So after the Texas War of Independence and various battles, like the Battle of the Alamo was just a side effect of the Texas Revolution. At that time, it wasn't really that much highlighted. It only became more important later in the 19th century, especially during and after the Civil War. But the Alamo was still important, but it was not the most important single event ever. There's a lot more important historical events in Texas and America than the Alamo. It's just a stupid old Spanish mission where a bunch of Texans defended from the Mexican army. So anyways, after Texas became a republic, it was overwhelmingly affected by Jacksonian politics and by people who did not want banks or private corporations to come in. They wanted it to be an agricultural, slave-holding state. And that was the situation that Texas found itself when it joined the Union in 1845. So after 1845 to 1860, Texas just became another slave state. It was virtually no different from the rest of the other southern states in having no private corporations, no central banks allowed. There was restrictions on Jews and Catholics. Although, they could be citizens, it was mainly a Protestant, Anglo-centric southern society. And so in 1861, Texas joined the Confederacy. One of the reasons that they cited about why they seceded from the United States was because of white supremacy. They openly said that blacks and coloreds were naturally inferior to whites, and that the condition of slavery and servitude was natural for the blacks, and the whites were the natural master race. And, take that as you will. There's a lot of the age of romanticism that is connected to that theory. So Texas actually became a republic again. It was actually a republic for a second time before it joined the Confederate States. And so 90,000 Texans fought in the Confederacy, and 28 or 30,000 died in the Civil War. And the Civil War basically destroyed the Texas economy. It basically just completely ruined and completely broke and put Texas into poverty. And then, of course, the blacks were freed, and there was a lot of racial violence during Reconstruction. Texas was under the military occupation number 5 of the Union Army, but Texas was pretty quickly readmitted under a Republican-dominated or black Republican majority. So after the Civil War, Texas recovered and cotton became the staple again. Texas was a mostly sharecropping state. You know what sharecropping is?
Is that like what the farmers use the fields at certain times?
Yeah. Well.
Or is that crop rotation? I don't know too much about agriculture.
It's a crop rotation. Well, it's based on crop rotation.
Oh, okay.
So, like 40% of Southern whites and 60 or something percent of blacks did not own their land. They were sharecroppers, and they were completely impoverished. And that was basically the system until the Great Depression. And during this time, the railroads were built. There was a lot of problems with issues with regulating of the railroads and regulations of the railroads and stuff. But it did help to diversify the Texas economy. And when oil was discovered at Sutter's Mill in 1901, in Texas in 1901, oil production became very important. By 1930, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma were producing or distributing 60% of the oil in the entire United States. So oil and gas and lumber took off, and the Texas economy became more diversified. But in 1929, the stock market crashed and the Great Depression happened. And this pretty much destroyed the crop rotation system, the sharecropper system. But it opened up for improvements to finally come into Texas. But it was not until the Second World War. Now, unfortunately, take it as whatever you will, but most Texans did believe that the Nazis were committing vast atrocities in Europe with the Kristallnacht and the Holocaust and stuff. And like 30,000 or 40,000 something Texans, actually I think 100,000, 200,000 Texans fought in World War II. I forgot how many fought in World War I, but it's probably about the same number, rounded down. But a lot of Southerners fight in the U.S. Army and stuff, but the result of that was that shipping became important in Texas. The economy finally industrialized, and Texas went to being a majoritively urban and industrial-based state. And the service, or the private sector, finally built up. We finally had banking, private banking and corporations come in after World War II. And with the end of Jim Crow, it really made it possible for Walmart and for CSV Pharmacy, Subway, and all of these private commercial companies to come in and diversify the economy. But on the whole, Texas, the average Texan earns less than the average person in a northern state. I mean, it's still affected like the rest of the South in some poverty, except in the major urban areas. But at the same time, it's also growing and diversifying, and its economy is booming just like California. So in that regard, Texas is actually closer to a western state than to a southern state. So,
well, doesn't Texas have a bunch of tech companies now, like Texas Instruments and all that sort of stuff?
Yes, it does. It has a pretty diversified, wide-ranging stuff about it. Is Mormon Shaggy in my chat?
What, in the YouTube chat?
No, it's just esoteric Shaggyism. Forget him.
Esoteric Shag.
Taste of smoked cheddar. I'm talking about CVS Pharmacy. You don't know what CVS Pharmacy is? I'm talking to someone in the chat.
Oh, I don't know what it is, but I'm not an American, so I don't know every single American business.
Yeah. Well, did you know that Walmart opened in Missouri? Walmart opened in
What,
Missouri.
the first one?
Yeah, in the 1960s, I believe.
Isn't Walmart owned by like one family? Like, I don't think it's a public business, isn't it? It's like a private owned family.
It's actually against the law to run a private family-oriented business. It's like any other major corporation. It has a board of shareholders, and the family that runs Walmart has the biggest shares, or holds the biggest shares on the board. That's how all like multi-billion-dollar corporations are run.
Oh, true. So it's not just owned by the family.
Yeah. Oh, did you know that Walmart was kicked out of Germany? Walmart actually failed in Germany.
Why's that?
Yeah. They tried to open in 1997 there, and by 2006 they left. They closed their last stores. Because the Germans...
Yeah, there's no Walmart in New Zealand.
I guess because the Germans just didn't want all of that fat American produce and wasteful American, unnatural American produce and all of that worthless shopping stuff that Americans do. Europeans are not wanting to go to supermarkets and artificial places like Americans and other people do. Europeans or Asians. They don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of supermarkets either. I prefer to just go to smaller stores.
Yeah. So, what would you think about Texas? The potential of what would you think would happen if Texas became independent and had like its own military armed forces? Like, do you think that they would
Well,
continue the liberal policies of the United States, or would they try to like go back into some kind of a some sort of a past historical movement or something?
well, I'm not the biggest expert on Texas, but I do know that Texas already has like a National Guard, right? So that could be the new military. Whether it'll still be liberal, I mean, if you become independent, you're at least freed from like the shackles of the U.S. Constitution, so you can pretty much write your own laws without the feds getting involved. But I do think if Texas did become independent by like a referendum or something, it would have to stay relatively friendly to the United States because that's obviously going to be the biggest economic partner of an independent Texas. So it can't be too, I guess, what, too aggressive or standoffish to a United States that Texas is independent from because it's going to be a major trading partner.
Yeah, I don't think that Texas would really be able to do much without the United States. Also, would it actually be able to even join the United Nations? Like, how would Texas reconcile a lot of issues with minorities, with sexual minorities, LGBTQ rights, and like, just really trade with the entire world? Because the rest of the world can only trade through the Gulf of Mexico with Texas. Everywhere else it would have to go through Mexico or the United States over land. Would Texas even be able to join NAFTA? There's a lot of critical issues.
It depends.
Go ahead.
Well, if the United States recognizes a independent Texas, I don't think they really have much of a choice. Like they would have to be led into organizations like the World Trade Organization and the UN because they'll be a sovereign recognized nation. But if they unilaterally declare independence and the United States doesn't agree, I mean, then they probably won't be let in because the Americans won't recognize it. Then NATO won't recognize it. Then the European Union won't recognize it. So it'll only be a partly recognized state. So that wouldn't be allowed into the UN or the World Trade Organization.
Yeah, and Texas would basically become a third world country. With all of the Mexican immigrants and all of the Latino people here, I mean, Texas would basically be like a Latin American state.
Yeah. That might become a new Argentina.
Yeah, well, I mean, Texas is still mostly white. It's like over half white, and so is Argentina. So I guess you're right.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So you're saying...
I think Argentina and Texas are both about 60% white, so there you go.
Yeah, maybe so. What about with all the oil and the gasoline and stuff like that? Like, what would be your...
We can always make money off that.
Well, it would only go so far. I mean, the world system is already transitioning away from fossil fuels to alternative fuels and stuff like sand and water and oxygen or air power and whatever else, reusable fuels.
Well, unless I'm mistaken, a lot of Texas, like you said earlier, when it was first, founded as part of the Mexican Empire, it's a pretty barren place. So you could put, renewable energy sources in Texas, like wind farms or solar farms.
Well,
so you could do that to transition away from oil, potentially.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of open space, but, like, Texas is too much dependent on its gas like Norway and Scotland are, or like how Saudi Arabia is. It's way too dependent on its gas and oil reserves that it developed in the mid-1900s. which helped it to become an industrial, important, highly populated state in the first place in the mid 20th century. But now, Texas has got to move past that. It's got to move over to like a renewable energy based sector.
Does Texas have any major rivers that you could build like a hydro dam on?
Not very many. There's not that many. There's the Sibon River and the Red River and stuff on the border with Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. There's the Rio Grande, but there's not very many other rivers like that. There's the Colorado River, I think, in West Texas. But there's not too many rivers, to run electro power plants.
Keno Train!
I'm gonna mute myself right fast. Do you want to talk to the audience or what, bro?
Yeah, I'll talk to the audience. I'll see what they have to say.
Rick Perry, it's a hard man. Yep. Esoteric Shaggyism says, yeehaw. Yeah, mate, yeehaw, mate. Esoteric Shaggyism says, Agar Gel is a federal asset. It's not true! Greek says, remember the Alamo, then he posts a little emoji with a cow. And then Greek also says, Rick Perry muted me on Stoic's chat. Mate, you sweeping people up, Rick. Stoic fears the Forge. Yeah, he does. And then I said, can I jump in the call? And then Ghost Niccolo says, Forge Gang! And then Esoteric Shaggyism says again that I am a Fed that works for the Australian federal government. Do not trust him! Mate, I said it before. Not true! Then Rick Perry swept up his own chats. And then Esoteric Shaggyism said, there's studies that show it wipes out your gut bacteria. Oh, this is when I was talking to Warhammer about the ibuprofen. Yeah, I'll probably mention that to him again. You shouldn't be eating like 2 tablets of ibuprofen every day. It is going to completely destroy your stomach lining and it'll give you stomach ulcers. So you shouldn't be doing that. Why would you use it as a diet of pills is beyond my comprehension. Yeah, I mean, ideally he should just be exercising and eating less, but it sounds like Weimer had some problems with his foot, so I guess that made it hard for him to do exercise. Spoken like a true Texan. Yep. Then Esoteric Shaggyism says, that sounds rough, oof. I'm glad I don't take those. Yep, I'm glad I don't take it either.
Okay, I'm back.
Hey, mate.
Hey, what's up?
And then Dark Ninja says, Forge Gang!
Forge Gang! Hard man forever! Forge Gang! Forge hard man!
I pretty much went through the whole chat, and then, oh wait, Dark Ninja says Mom and Shaggy needs to be stopped. Yep. That guy's out of control. He's spiraling hard. He needs like an intervention. He's like falling out of his trailer and like smashing up his face. He's drinking gin every night and then like going to bed in a like drinking passed out coma. He's not in a very good state, is he? And he's threatening people. He's threatening people with his gun. He's threatening to go to people's houses. He's threatening his former employer. He's threatening Warhammer. The guy's gone crazy, mate. He's spiraling hard.
He really has, man. He's really insane, dude. He really has gotten a little bit off the edge. Euro says that he wants me to have a ceasefire with Mormon Shaggy.
Well, I mean, you know, I think you're getting to him too much. You're sort of like breaking his mind. He's going out of control. The guy needs to like, it's also Shaggy's fault. He just needs to get off the internet for maybe a week or two and just sort of focus on himself and sort himself out and stop drinking so much gin.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So, Texas is surrounded by, it's pretty much almost entirely surrounded by land. Most of the states around it are not really that economically important. Louisiana, I think they do mostly hemp, and, there's New Orleans. I don't know too much about Louisiana. Arkansas is mostly forestry and kind of natural produce stuff. Oklahoma, it's just a Native American reserve. A lot of Indians live there. Yeah, New Mexico has some stuff, but not much. But it's pretty economically okay, I guess. The state of Colorado is another state I don't know all that much about. But yeah, and of course, the part of Texas that borders Mexico, like, it's like going into another planet. Like the
It's like you're going into Mexico.
yeah, the disparity of income and the disparity of wealth is very obvious when you hop over the border. Mexico has done much to basically improve itself, but it's still pretty backwards and pretty bad in the rural areas. So
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Mexico is extremely corrupt. So
it's one of the most corrupt places in the world. Brazil is even worse.
yeah, Brazil's pretty corrupt. Well, it's like every couple of years the president of Brazil gets impeached for corruption. I think the last 2 or 3 presidents have been impeached because of corruption charges in Brazil.
Yeah, basically so. What did you say? The Brazilian president has been indicted because of corruption charges?
I don't know if it was the current one, the one before. I think there was a couple presidents in Brazil, at least 2 of the last 3 that have been impeached for corruption.
Oh, I see.
Remember how Brazil had that woman as a president? I think she got impeached for corruption.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you a question. How well do you think Texas does with its chapter on slavery? Do you think that it's done very poorly? Do you not really care in general, or how do you feel about the legacy of slavery in Texas?
Well, I see why slavery existed, and especially in pre-industrial societies, because it was just a way that you just sort of needed it for some industries that otherwise wouldn't have been economically viable. But then I think as the Industrial Revolution happened and productivity of agriculture, of labor, and everything went up, you sort of didn't really need to have slavery anymore because you could actually afford to pay people and still make profits on things like farming. So I'd say just because of when Texas was sort of founded as a republic in 1835 or something.
Yeah,
It was already sort of pretty late. The Industrial Revolution was kicking off, so the slavery I think was sort of on the tail end, and it was sort of it was going to end one way or the other.
Yeah, it's just the circumstances of the way it ended in Texas. There was 400,000 slaves in 1860 in Texas, and Confederate Texas...
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. There was more in other southern states, believe it or not. The only reason it wasn't higher was because...
population of Texas?
Do what?
At the Civil War, time of the Civil War. What was the population of Texas during the Civil War?
700,000. Don't forget that 50 or 40,000 Texans died in the Civil War too.
Yeah.
So yeah, slavery, I think slavery has left a pretty bad slate on Texan history, and a lot of Texans don't really try to reconcile with this aspect of their history. There were plantations down here, and there were brutality towards the slaves in the South, so it has left a pretty bad mark.
Yeah, I just think that Texas didn't really need slavery. It could have just adopted agricultural processes that didn't need slaves to be profitable, like they did in the northern states and Canada and whatnot, and the British Empire at the time that had sort of outlawed slavery by that point. They just had to adapt their agricultural processes.
Pretty much so, man. But I guess because it was settled by other people from the South, or by Southerners, white Southerners who brought their slaves, and they considered them to be property, it just wasn't going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, if the Civil War had not happened, there's no telling how long slavery would have lasted in the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
No, I don't think it would have lasted long. Even if, like, say, the South won the Civil War, I don't think slavery would have lasted another, like, 50 years. Like, slavery would have been done away with in the South eventually.
it would have been replaced by more mercantile and industrial means. For sure. Eventually, they would have had to liberalize their economy.
But I mean, places like Brazil, like even they abolished slavery eventually, like the very, very late 19th century. I think like 1889 or something. And they just did it because it wasn't really economically viable anymore. And there was a lot of sort of liberals within society that wanted slavery abolished.
Yeah, basically so. The South, the antebellum South, did not have that many liberals. You have to remember, like there wasn't really any liberals anywhere in the antebellum South. It was all slaveholder Jacksonian Democrats, and they all opposed monopolies, private monopolies, and corporations, and like the railroad guilds, the railroad hub guilds and stuff, and you know, they basically were only in favor of open private agricultural stuff.
Yeah.
But what do you think would have happened to Texas if Texas never joined the United States in 1845? Like, how do you think?
Well, if it sort of didn't wane and it was able to, I guess, also resist the influences of both the North and the South of the United States, I think it would have been a, you know, fairly successful state, probably similar in standard of living to the United States or Canada.
Potentially, but I mean, it's an almost entirely landlocked country, and like the Gulf of Mexico.
The Gulf of Mexico.
The Gulf of Mexico isn't exactly a trade hub center or a global trade hub network. Like, Houston was never going to grow in the same way that New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles would have. You know, it would.
No, that is true. I do agree with that. I still think, especially when they found oil, it probably would have been quite poor until they found oil, and then it probably would have been somewhat rich after that, and you know, potentially it could have sort of modernized and industrialized after it found oil to sort of kickstart its economy. But who knows? It might have ended up like Venezuela. But I think it probably would have turned out better than that.
Yeah, I think that in any kind of an Anglo settler society is going to turn out better than Venezuela for sure.
Yeah, no, that is also part of it. Like most Anglo countries, you know, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, you know, England, you know, they're pretty high quality, they're high standard of living. I mean, New Zealand doesn't have much national resources, but even though it's like it's not the best Anglo country, it's not as bad as like Southern America.
So, what would you think would have happened if, like, Mexico won the War of Texas Independence and, you know, kept Texas and, like, kicked out all the Texans? And they had to, like, go, I don't know, to California?
Well, it probably would have ended up like, you know, Baja, California, sort of like sparsely populated, like, desert. I mean, the Mexicans probably would have found the oil eventually as well, so they would have probably got rich off that. But Mexico is much more corrupt than the United States was, so I doubt that sort of wealth would have led to sort of even economic growth that benefited the whole society.
Okay, so if Texas joined the Confederacy and the Confederacy won the Civil War, like what would you see for the last 160 years of Confederate Texas history? We're just talking about alternative history now.
Yeah, okay, that's sort of a bit of a different one, because I think the Confederacy would have had a very hard time, because they would have been, if they won the war, they would have been very economically isolated. They didn't really have very much allies. They got a little bit of like supplies from France and Britain, but it wasn't really much. And even during the Civil War, there's a lot of British volunteers, mostly to the Union. But I'd say it would have been independent Confederate states would have had a tough time because they would have been very, very economically isolated. It would be sort of like Russia now. That would have probably been like sanctioned and had like trading embargoes and pushed on it. So I think it would have been a pretty tough time.
Yeah, so with all those trade embargoes, it would eventually had to have been forced to abolish slavery.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It probably wouldn't have even taken very long.
Yeah.
Probably would have only taken a couple decades.
There were a handful of high-ranking Confederates that wanted the Confederacy to join the British Empire in some kind of an economic union, believe that or not. I don't think the British would have ever accepted
but the British weren't ever going to accept that while they had slavery. Like, the Britons were very anti-slavery at that point.
Yeah. Like, inevitably, the North and the South would have come to some kind of terms on something.
Yeah, but I think if the South eventually abolished slavery, it would have had a much more easier time. So it would have been able to trade with like Britain and the United States.
Yeah, basically so. What about, so anyways, what do you think about the future of Texas? Like, Elon Musk has moved the headquarters of SpaceX to, like, somewhere in South Texas. I don't know what the name of the town is, but he's moved the headquarters to Texas. It seems like a lot of Californian companies are moving to Texas, but now, there's all of these out-of-state corporations and global and national corporations that are coming into Texas and employing millions of people or thousands of people. And what it is it's basically, made Texas economically dependent on foreign business and companies. And like Texas is just being globalized. And also, the state...
Well, that's the thing. I think
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, you go.
And also,
I was going to say, if the current trend continues, Texas will probably just become another California.
That's what I'm thinking. There's a bunch of Californian and people from the western states and the Midwest that are moving into Texas. It's losing its Texas draw. The state is losing its Texas draw, and it's losing its southern culture and its kind of unique Texan culture, and it's just basically integrating and becoming like the rest of the United States.
Well, that's the thing. California never, like, it wasn't always a liberal shithole. Like, it was also, in a lot of ways, like Texas. It was sort of sparsely, populated, sort of arid and sort of desert. But it wasn't until, the 60s and whatnot, where it became like a trading hub, and you had a lot of migrants and whatnot come into there, that it sort of started to liberalize starting in the 60s and going into the 80s and into, like, now, basically, where it's like a liberal hellhole. But I think Texas is on the same path. It's just about, 40 years behind.
Yeah, so that's what happened to your country of New Zealand. It just turned into a globalized hellhole.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened here.
Well, right now, Texas...
New Zealand... Sorry, you go.
Texas has a lot of economic potential. I think the main thing that people are wanting to drive is they want to stop illegal immigration from the southern border, and they want to diversify the economy and move it to energy renewable resources, clean up the environment, and basically rise the living standard. I just found out that Austin has made it to where it'll be possible for homeless people and people that are below the poverty line to have universal basic income. So Austin has now passed a universal basic income. What do you think about that, sir?
Well, it sounds like Texas actually has economic potential, which New Zealand doesn't. Like, there's no economic potential here. So at least it's got that going for it.
Yeah. I can't believe that in Austin they've passed a bill about universal basic income, giving people a free check.
I'm not going to lie, the universal basic income is actually pretty based.
Do what?
Universal basic income is actually sort of based.
Well, it is, dude. It's very hard to find a job, unless you're highly educated. Jobs are becoming harder for people without any degrees to get. without any college degrees, like, basic, jobs that pay for everything that you need.
Yeah, I agree. And, you have inflation and standing of living going up while labour productivity is going up, but, the wealth isn't being distributed properly to, the actual workers that are increasing their productivity with, increases in advances in technology and stuff like that. Yeah, so I'm sort of pro UBI because we should be sort of sharing the economic prosperity, not it just sort of all going like vented upwards via like, interest rates and, corporations just benefiting off people's productivity while the workers aren't.
Yeah, basically so. There aren't really no unions in Texas though, except maybe in Houston. Maybe in Houston or Dallas, but I think that's it. Like, Houston is our only
The
city of
unions in New Zealand,
immigrants.
they're all a joke. Like, they're all just sort of grifting scams. But I'm pro-union if the union's not retarded, which all the sort of unions in New Zealand are.
It's the same thing in America. The Midwest is full of a bunch of unions. Chicago is probably the most unionized city. New York is probably even more unionized, and it's been so freaking retarded, and it's so silly. But yeah, all those socialist
Yeah, no, I think I heard
unions.
some...
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, you go.
Yeah, all of those unions, trade unions, and socialist stuff, they don't work, dude.
Well, I mean, unions can work. The union needs to be run properly and not be corrupt, which a lot of unions are. I think there's a couple of unions in Australia that are all right, but in New Zealand, and from what it sounds like, most of the ones in America are sort of like corrupt and stupid and retarded. Well, I know that also the unions in the United States have problems with like organized crime, like infiltrating the unions and like just embezzling money out of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of the Italian mafia, the Irish mob, I think, and the Mexican MS-13, they all infiltrate the unions and embezzle money into them. So it's just, that's why unions have been, like, busted. That's why there's been so much of a union bust in the last 4 decades. 3 to 4 decades.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, anyways, I probably will head off soon, but it was good talking to you about Texas.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, bro, but I don't really think Texas could break away from the United States. The rest of the
It
country...
would be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible, but it would be very difficult to do. At least not without completely redrafting the Constitution of 1787, all of the state constitutions in all the 50 states, and then what happens to Puerto Rico or Midway or Guam, what happens to these other territories. But yeah.
No, that's a good point. Well, anyways, mate, I'll leave you to it and try not to eat too much ibuprofen because it will mess you up.
Okay, thank you for your suggestion. You have a good day, 3-4. I'll see you later. Forge gang! Let's go!
Forge gang! Let's go!
Alright, bye. Alright. That call is over with. Alright, so... Yeah, Texas is a state that has a fairly diversified, though not totally diversified economy. There is the basis of a high-tech network and high-tech networking system here. The economy of Texas is very huge. It is very large, and there is a lot of possibilities in the state. The state has a lot of land mass and land area. The manners of the Texan people are not the best. Like the euphemisms, the mannerisms and stuff that Texans give to people from outside are not really that nice. It's not really that good. So Texas is definitely not the nicest state to move to. There are definitely better states in the USA that have a higher standard of living. But hey, if Elon Musk is moving to Texas, of course, he's a strong believer in unregulated capitalism. So yeah, Texas probably has one of the very least business regulated economy ever. Very good for free unregulated finance. It's a very ethnic and racially diverse state. Definitely very ethnically and very racially diverse, very religiously diverse. Texas, as far as I can tell, Texas has a good economic future. The political future of Texas is not that bright. It's basically a Republican-dominated state, and the Republicans have done a lot to really throw Texas back by decades in terms of political organization and stuff. It is perhaps not the most friendly LGBTQTA state in the country, but it's also not the worst. Universal basic income has been introduced in the city of Austin, and it will not be long before other cities across the state introduce it. I'm not totally for sure about the LGBT stuff, but in most of the urban areas of Texas, it's pretty much fine. I mean, like, most of the state is fairly gay-friendly as far as I can tell. But there's also a lot of backlash and pushback from the southern aspect as well. You will see a lot of Confederate flags, of course, in the state. So, yeah. Now, if Texas were to break away from the United States and were it to engage with other parts of the world, Texas could probably very quickly get on friendly relations with China, Mexico, and with most European countries. I don't really know how Texas would deal with in regards to relations with Russia. I would imagine that the Russians would probably not be that friendly to Texas, because to them it wouldn't be that much different from the United States. They would just see it as like a second Canada, which is also sometimes looked down on as a colony of the United States or an outcrop of the United States. So yeah, Texas has a lot of high economic potential. The social and the political aspects are not so good. But overall, like, the state has a pretty bright future ahead of it. So, unless Ghost of Niccolo is coming on at this point, I'm going to probably end the stream. So anyways, Mexico would treat Texas just like it does to the United States, has a more economically and socially developed and more industrialized state. Mexico would be very open to trading directly with Texas. I imagine that in time the United States would also trade with Texas, and it would just join NAFTA. Most of the world outside of North America would probably not generally engage with Texas that much. I don't really know what Canada would do about Texas. Canada is a very left-wing, very openly liberal or neoliberal run government, but I mean, if Texas were to join NAFTA, the UN, and NATO and stuff, it would probably basically, just be treated like the United States or Canada or other Anglo countries in that regard. But anyways, yeah, that's basically it. So, if Ghost of Niccolo does not come on in a couple of minutes, I'm going to probably go ahead and end the stream. I think that was a pretty good talk about the geopolitics. So, this is the first geopolitical analysis that I'm doing. The first one was about Texas and about Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas. I'm going to be doing some other geopolitical analyses at a later time. I don't know exactly when, but yeah, that's going to be it.